to remember. One thing, some people had questions about the ISCN, how it works, what does membership mean. If you've got questions about that, please speak to my colleague Debbie or any of our team, me, Matt, or Claire. You can just grab us whenever. So we're going to go group by group, starting with Ying and Bart. Just a quick summary about working group 1, 5-minute summary, and then everybody who was in this group is free to pitch in and add their experiences.
Hello. I'm going to very briefly report our group, the topics that our group discussed. So we were focusing on the building performance, and we had input from Cornell University, from University of Gothenburg, and also Nova Atlantis. And so I'm going to talk about some of the tactic issues that we talked about, and Bart is going to talk about some more strategic issues. Then we'll talk about our plan. So overall, the first day, we devoted time to talk about how we understand the actual performance, measure the performance of buildings, and how we use that knowledge to help us improve the level performance of buildings, and also inform the next step of design or retrofit. And the group actually felt there's a gap between the amount of attention onto the design phase versus the actually a lot of the obstacles in the operation phase. So if we look at the pre-design stage, which is actually very important for set the tone and for the next 20, 30 years, but usually the operating staff, facility managers have very little involvement with that key stage. And also, if we look at the know-how level, there's an obvious gap between the designers, engineers, and the operating staff. So how to improve that actually is a key to the performance of buildings. And then there's one more thing mentioned by several team members is that the simplicity of the system is very important. Something we can understand, we can operate. If not, then we sort of just leave it to random factors. And so the simplicity actually needs design input, but also it also sometimes it's limited by some of the policies, like the lowest bid is actually one reason why several universities end up with multiple systems from multiple vendors, which is a huge challenge for the operation. And then lab is mentioned many times, which we'll probably dedicate time to discuss lab performance in our next meeting. So I'll let Bart.
Thanks, Ying. In the second working group session, we had presentations from very good presentations from Nova Atlantis and Gothenburg about issues associated with campus sustainability and the marketing, if you like, of research out to achieve sustainable outcomes in the broader community. And then we focused, as the slide behind me shows, on the issue of sustainable building standards and whether or not they are a net positive in driving a sustainability culture and outcomes at a university level. I won't go through all of those points, but overall, the group believed there were some positives about them, though there are also some potential weaknesses in the current standards, which are very regionalised and many of them around the world. Regionalised, obviously, because they're tailored around the needs and particular demands of the country that has endorsed them. And probably one of the more significant weaknesses, though, is the post-occupancy measures and continued certification. Buildings are built, they're built and designed to operate sustainably, but in the experience of many people who operate buildings, the model design performance is often not met, and there is very few formal mechanisms for continued certification of the performance, sustainable performance of the building. This slide just highlights several of the follow-up actions that, from the group, we're proposing will be followed up through the next 12 months and form part of the discussion at 2013. And as mentioned there, one is to review what several of the standards are now doing in terms of community-wide or community-based certification. So rather than looking at the certification of a building for a sustainability standard, what might you be able to do in terms of certifying a campus? And the other thing, which is I think a very critical thing for those universities with a high research component in their portfolio, is actually laboratory certification and creating sustainable laboratory functions. I think that's it.
And I'd just like to add one more thing, something that we didn't get time to do, which is, actually inspired by yesterday's presentation on social information. So because we meet every year, and I think it actually nice for the group to talk about, personal action plan for the next year and announce to the group. And then next year when we come back and meet again, sort of check on how much we have achieved, individually, and in terms of teaching, research, and work. So that might be something we would try next year. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Ying and Bart. I really like the idea to carry it also between the years, and we could think about mechanisms to support you, maybe the website functions for that. Anybody from Working Group 1 who wants to add something quickly? Or was that covering the most important things? Looks like everybody's happy. So, Anne?
I'm not in the group, but when you mentioned laboratories, all of us, many people are building new buildings, so laboratory design is very important. But if you could also focus on how you might do retrofitting in laboratory buildings, that would be useful.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
So Working Group 2, we had Julie moderate the first session. Julie, you want to say a few words, and then Debbie will talk about the second session?
Working Group 2, I was asked to come moderate the discussion by bringing in some strategic thinking around sustainability strategic planning. And I think what was intriguing was, I think as a membership organization, we need to figure out what role that actually plays in shaping our engagement together. There's clearly a need. What really came out both in the discussion and questions, both during and after the session, is what a range within this room of folks, of institutions that actually, from those who have no targets or actually just started their job a week ago and are trying to figure out what targets to set to develop, to those of us who have 45 plus goals set. Also the range of just the cultural, I think this is really where the richness of ISCN really comes together, which is the cultural context of how best to set these questions. And it has just made for, I'd say, some of the most engaging discussion I've had over the past couple of days in terms of what's that matrix going to look like, and how do you develop this across so many different institutions, from so many different food sources, access to transportation, different priorities, financial constraints. I keep thinking of Amy and Joe in terms of National University of Singapore and some of those universities in China, which are just doubling in size to those of us who've slowed down a little bit on this end. So I think we still need to figure this out. I think what's clear is that I think we all agree that targets are useful. There's certainly a lot to learn from one another in terms of setting targets, incremental targets at least, establishing what that vision is in your own cultural context, sharing best practices on how to achieve those targets, but then figuring out how to maintain a high level of sophisticated dialogue, so we're not comparing notes on trayless dining or who's got the least amount of water bottles on their campus, but we're really talking about integration into master planning. We're talking about campus growth. We're talking about it was fascinating from the discussion that Bern will talk about in terms of the priorities from Singapore. I keep bringing up because it's such a fascinating end of the spectrum with 98% of your food is imported, whereas Ecuador, I know I've said this probably many times, but that is just a fascinating spectrum, whereas Ecuador, most of your food comes from within 120 miles, if I recall. So we're just dealing with such different spectrums within the same room, and yet ISCN enables us to have that dialogue. So I think we need to continue this discussion and figure out, so we're not all continuing to do it just on our own. What's the power of the collective, and how can we support one another, and then how do we somehow sum up the aggregate of our impact at the global level?
Thanks, Julie. So for day 2, we actually had a presentation by David from Chatham. He kind of gave some nice remarks about his experiences on the campus there. And then we dove into this exercise that we called a materiality assessment. And this is something that's done very commonly when you're doing a GRI report, because there are so many different indicators and so many different topics that you could include in a strategic sustainability plan. And the question is, which topics bubble up to the top? How do you prioritize those? So the materiality assessment allows you to, it gives you kind of a method for stepping through that by looking at perspectives from off-campus, so external stakeholders, and that could be your government, it could be NGOs that are looking at you, it could be the media, and then also looking at it from the perspective of internal stakeholders, so that's your faculty, staff, and students, and those types of groups. So within that, there are 6 test questions that you look at to help get you thinking from the perspective of all those different stakeholders. And then basically what we did is we looked at all of the different topics that fall under Working Group 2 and did an evaluation of, do we consider this a low, medium, or high priority for each of those 2 stakeholder groups. And so the way that we did this was we broke out into 3 different groups, and we had 3 different scenarios, so pretending you're on a campus, and one of the campuses was the fast-growing Asian university. Another was a medium-sized European research university that was in more of an urban setting. And then the third one was a small liberal arts college that was in more of a rural setting in the U.S. So as you can imagine, each of those has very different demographics and different dynamics. So as everybody kind of went through the different topics, we actually visually plotted out the importance on a matrix. So topics that were low priority for internal and external stakeholders would basically be in your lower left, and then topics that would be high priority for both groups would be in the upper right. So as you go through this exercise and everybody kind of collectively decides what the priorities are, you see these clusters that start to emerge, and anything that ends up in the high priority for both stakeholder groups, basically those are the topics that you really want to focus your efforts on in terms of your strategic planning. And then some of the other ones you can kind of set aside or consider dealing with those later on. So some of the interesting things that came up, obviously the priorities are different for different campus typologies. And one example of that would be the small liberal arts college has a very big commuter population, so transportation impacts bubbled up to the top as a very important topic. Whereas a growing Asian university has basically a bunch of green space, and they're trying to figure out, how they're going to lay out their buildings and how are they just going to plan everything. So master planning ended up being a really important topic for them. And what was interesting across all 3 scenarios was obviously carbon ended up bubbling to the top. That was very important for all of the campuses. And food sustainability kind of fell down into that lower left quadrant of not as important. So it was kind of an interesting way to really visualize what topics are becoming hot topics in campus sustainability, what are kind of the standards that you're expected to look at, like carbon. And obviously it helps you to look at and consider the different trade-offs and differences in values, so and the differences in levels of information. So if you're talking about what a student knows about versus what a senior administrator knows about versus what the media knows about the campus, they all have different levels of information and they have different priorities. So this kind of gives you a lens to deal with those different perspectives. And that's basically it.
Great. Thanks, Julie and Debbie. Anybody else from Working Group 2 or somebody else having a comment, a question? So it seemed pretty clear. One thing we realized in preparing this conference that we would like to make some changes in the focus of Working Group 2. Working Group 2 had, over the last years, really very good discussions about architectural, physical master planning, but less so about target setting, including carbon targets and other things. So we're thinking about restructuring and broadening the focus of Working Group 2, and we'll keep you posted of how this is gonna happen. Now, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I had a quick question. It seemed like a very useful tool for visualization. Is that something you could make available? And it seemed in the abstract like a tool that could work for other working groups or for us to bring back to our campus.
It will certainly be included in the conference summary, and it might be a topic to go deeper on in the next meeting next year. Jack?
Group 2 discussed equity issues or environmental literacy, sustainability literacy. How does this come up as a concern?
In the exercise we did, just for the constraint of time, we looked at principle 2 topics. So all the education is principle 3, which of course is part of the exercise. We didn't have time for it. We talked about equity. We talked about access to education, both physical access and financial access, and that bubbled up as something that is certainly very important for internal populations, including students, and it really depends on which kind of campus, which kind of culture, how much it's seen as external importance, including the question, is education free, like basically in Europe, or does it cost, like here? So it really depends on the context. Arya and Nancy?
All right, so Working Group 3 is about integrating research, education, facilities, and community engagement for sustainable development. So it's a very comprehensive, large topic. And so in Gothenburg, we really had identified 4 areas of work for the working group, how we could go about coming to grips with the topic. The first one was case studies, of course, for exchange, based on which we exchange. The second is conceptual work on living laboratories, fostering societal transition, and joint knowledge production, including interdisciplinarity and the boundaries and the borders you have to overcome in joint knowledge production, that you have to create processes and platforms for generating mutual understanding across organizational boundaries and across disciplinary boundaries, a third area for conceptual work is connecting research and education to practice on and off campus, and possible ways to foster this and barriers that need to be addressed. We have, and another area of work then is of Working Group 3 is to focus on processes for joint learning across boundaries, both discussing processes but also trialing them out. So we welcomed last year's suggestion to do a World Cafe, and we did that, and Nancy will talk more about that, how the World Cafe then enabled us to both have a process to look at issues, but also to experience a process where we try to combine different perspectives and what the challenges are to do that. The fourth area that was deemed important is to develop tools to make change agents more effective in their home institutions. And that's probably the area where we have made least progress, but where we developed a very concrete idea for next year. So the session format, we basically, the first day had a more classical presentation format, and the first presentation was given by the team of the University of Oregon. It was the Sustainable Cities Initiative, and Steve had basically suggested this, and we had both representatives of academia and staff, as well as a representative from the city to describe this approach where the city basically cities compete for having a year of University of Oregon attention. And the winning city then identifies projects, and there's a syllabus matching, and then students in a specific set of well-matching courses that have some relevance to the projects that the city has identified as a ground of collaboration, then work on these issues and make recommendations and foster implementation. So basically we had that project, and then we had a second case study presented by the University of Gothenburg, Jennifer Freeman and Eddie Omerson. And basically that was not a needs-driven, project-driven approach by the city, but the other way around, a course syllabus-based approach to get students working on problems of practice in cities or areas. And so the two approaches were very complementary. And the third part of the session served to identify a World Cafe issue emerging from this comparison of two different approaches of linking education, research, and practice. Sorry, it's a bit of a crowded slide. It was prepared in a rush. Basically, key outcomes and observations that we distilled in our discussion were that experiential learning and change projects can work very well in smaller groups of students. And that also, though, means that guiding such projects is hugely time-intensive for faculty and can present a real strain on time management, as the students like a lot of contact and guidance. And so it's a challenge on how to organize this sustainably, also in terms of management of our human resources. And then it also was a point that experiential learning can but must not benefit from structured processes for guiding social interaction on complex issues, such as design thinking processes or social learning processes. So lessons learned basically for defining integration projects, this approach that the University of Oregon has developed to start from a needs basis and have cities make proposals of projects they care and that are somewhat stuck in the administration or that are in a creative phase that benefits from the type of inputs that student can give is a very, very good way of ensuring engagement of the city partners. In other projects, it can happen that the students get extremely engaged in their peer group and feel peer group pressure to do a lot of work, and then in the end, the administrative officials in the cities may not be so impressed. Here in the American setting, it was also mentioned as an advantage that the cities pay, so they feel they have a larger stake in the projects. But we also learned that if you look at project-based work and compare projects across different contexts, this can be, well, best practice on how to stage such integrative projects with students and faculty and city communities, that may be very context dependent. So it's very, I think it will be a challenge to try to come up with best practices on how to stage these projects. But definitely something that can foster more development of such projects is that in most universities the current reward and incentive structures for faculty are not well aligned with what faculty does in order to pull such projects up from the ground. So that's definitely something that needs looking at. And that led us to next steps, basically, that next year it will really benefit if we don't only look at cases and projects, but that we perhaps organize one day looking at cases and a second day looking at strategies and comparing strategies of different universities to foster interdisciplinarity in education and connection to practice in education. And the second sort of next step is we sort of more structured, more time spent on each case will be beneficial. As usual, we had a jam-packed agenda which suffered a little bit from too little time for all of the rich comments that surfaced. I think so many rich perspectives in the audience would have benefited from much longer discussion.
So because of the sake of time, I'll just hit a couple of highlights, and in our fuller report we'll give some distillation of some of the overarching themes. They align very well with what Julie had to say in general. Let me just do a call out though to Eve, Kate, and Emmanuel in the back row. Could you all just wave? We're going to do at the very end just a minute or two of a small slideshow to give some of you an experiential feel for the work, and they were richly documenting. That's the work ahead of us then, to take all the artifacts gathered from our World Cafe, and we'll come back with a fuller report. But just to give you a brief flavor, there were two topics that came out of our work that we decided to focus on, and then we had two working groups each, so we could see the way two completely different groups approached the same topic. So the topics that we settled on were this point that Ariana raised that came out very clearly day one, with Anne taking the lead on this with a paper that she had circulated about competing priorities and tensions in the pursuit of what excellence means at these different kind of colleges and universities around the globe, and its impact on moving ahead with excellence and sustainability. There are some tensions, so we put together two groups on that. And second, a topic that came out of day one was innovative learning. So people were really interested in finding real inspiration and innovation out of the group, talking about the social aspects of learning and what this might mean for bringing about change and sustainability and leveraging the combined talents. I won't go into all of our objectives or the format, but essentially we moved around in 3 rounds with the working groups, with a change between the second and third round, working very briefly on reframing these topics, talking about tensions and challenges, and then moving towards what to do next. A lot of words on here, but essentially I think what we came to was that people feel a need to find mechanisms for fresh perspectives, and that a lot of the schools that we had input from, regardless of all the different kinds, using the template that you had, Julie, if there was something that stuck with a lot of people as you listen between all the scribbles on the paper, was that many of the practices related to sustainability get added on to already entrenched structures. And we need to just back up. At one point, Chris's group said, maybe we just need to back up and say, what are our values as an institution, and then realign, which is, of course, not easy work to do, but a reframing. And we had a variety of lessons learned, but for next steps, I would say the main thing that we want to pull out is this issue of process, and the suggestion of the group, and perhaps we could do it along the lines of the template that your group was working with, is to think about also providing leadership training. This was a topic that came up very influenced by Sharp's talk that came right before the session, so this shows continuity for the sustainability leaders who are present. And we felt there was so much talent to get to collective solutions, but both working within the network that we have, but also going back and learning how to leverage collaboratively the talents on our own campuses is going to take a process change. So next year, we will work towards this. So Ariana will just finish up.
So just to summarize the outlook, we will continue work on case studies and definitely contribute to this will be our book, our ISCN book, where we have 12 cases and done a lot of conceptual work on the concepts outlined before. And we expect to launch in June 2013, so perhaps we can organize the book launch at the next meeting. Then tools for, so the next focus will be the topic we had neglected over the last year, and that is the tools for agents of change. And we really want to focus the session on courses and the leadership course, and I touched base with also Leith. Jack Spengler had suggested that, and I touched base with Leith Sharp, so we will be able to focus in more on leadership skills, what it takes to overcome these institutional barriers that have a long history to acting and focusing and integrating the way we want to integrate. And also we will work at the level both of projects and so these two courses and organizational strategies, comparing perhaps 2 or 3 cases of organizational strategies to foster interdisciplinarity in connection to practice and education. So if you have, if you think your university has a particular effective strategy in place on that, please let us know. We'd love to work with it. Now. Team members, is there anything we should add, we forgot that you most care about? Is there something we need to add? Or does this pretty much correspond to what you took home from the message? I see general nodding, so I guess that's all right. And now we actually had Yves Cormin-Boeuf and Kate Bouchard and Emmanuel, a team of 3 who really helped us to document our session in ways to foster creativity and thinking out of the box. And they also made us draw, and to me it was impressive what a frame shift it is when in the middle of a session where time runs, you suddenly step out and do a little drawing of how much you feel, and then you come back and you feel very much more centered and focused. So I was skeptic at first, but I felt it was helpful. So it was a great experience that the team of Eve presented to us, and here's the their documentation of our sessions, and presenting a third eye of what went on in our group.
Thanks so much to all the working group moderators and leaders. We're jumping right into the future of China and India, which I'm very excited about, and we can leave this background maybe just to run while the session is being set up. For those who came in late, we're doing a little questionnaire about this meeting and also, most importantly, what you expect from the future meetings and the future of the ISCN to prepare also our discussion we'll have a little bit later today. So I'll leave that up front. If you don't have a questionnaire right yet, please grab it, take a few minutes to complete it, and give it to one of the team members. Thank you so much.
I forgot that I was the one doing the introduction for this session this morning, and so I don't actually have my notes with me, so I'll try and go extemporaneously. So there are 2 of the 4 BRIC countries are represented here at the ISCN today. We wanted to have one session focusing specifically on that because likely in the future there, with huge population growth and changing living standards, we're going to see massive growth of corresponding growth of university campuses in those 2 countries. There's an enormous wealth of experience in the other countries in the room represented, and it would be neat to sort of get a peek into what's going on in China and hopefully India. Our speaker from India is either at the airport or possibly up in the air somewhere. We're still not sure, so it helps that we're on ISCN time, and he may actually be able to arrive in time for his speech. So while Kai is getting set up, like I said, we've asked Dr. Kai Liu from China. Kai spent the last year at MIT as a fellow working in their planning department. And we asked him very specifically to give us a glimpse into campus planning and building construction in China. I'll leave it at that. I'm sorry, that's a horrible introduction, and I missed read some notes between Bern and me, and I wasn't prepared to do it. Thank you.
Lecture about campus planning in China. At first, I want to introduce some background. The rapid economic development in China also brought about the unprecedented growth opportunities in higher education. Since 1999, mass education has finally replaced elite education. After years of large enrollment expansion, Chinese higher education has entered a new era of leaping forward. From 1997 to 2010, college students grew from 3 million to 22 million, and the total construction area for colleges and universities went from 144 million to 746 million square meters. China has added more than 1,000 universities in these 12 years, and more than 50 university cities were built in China. Here is some parts of the Chinese universities. The volume, scale, and the construction speed are not ever seen everywhere in the world. There are 4 campus development approaches in China. The first one is in situ expansion. The second is new campus construction. And the third, ex situ relocation. And last, university city. University city in China is the idea of combining a campus expansion with a new town development. Here is a photo of the Hualan University in Guangzhou University City. Now I want to introduce some strategies of sustainable campus design in China. Most of the Chinese university pays more attention to energy saving and resource conservation. Here is a model of a sustainable campus model. It refers about establishment of a recycling system of materials and energy, optimization in energy consumption, and the minimization of pollution, and the application of green technologies. Taking advantage of natural lighting and ventilation through proper building arrangements is one of the key premises in China campus planning. Such a practice plays an important role in reducing energy HVAC costs and creating healthy environments. South orientation is very important in China, in Chinese campus planning. The use of water and the green belts is as organic buffers effectively improves the campus microclimate, provides pleasant landscaping, and conserves energy. please pay attention to the advertisement. About green commuting. Restrictions of motor vehicles in campus. Priority given to pedestrian network and the promotion of using bicycles. In Guangzhou University City, it offers bicycle rental business, and it's free within 1 hour. China has been promoting ecological buildings and energy-saving campuses. The design center of Tsinghua University is the first eco building in the country. Maybe you can't know the word with the red circle. It means demolition. It's very popular in China. If you go to China, you can see the word everywhere. The rapid urbanization in China is accompanied by the demolition of a large number of old buildings. The accumulation of construction waste and the loss of city memories have been prime issues. Facing this condition, a Chinese architect collects hundreds and thousands of pieces of building waste and used them all in the project he commissioned, which won him the Pritzker Architectural Prize this year. So, every one of you also have a chance to win the prize. Welcome to China. The debris from old buildings is no longer seen as an eyesore. Its rebirth gives unique connotations to the new building. Memories of the city has been carried forward. The Chinese landscape is largely made up of mountains and hills. Plains or areas with gentle slope only cover 17%. Thus, land's conservation is crucial. A concentrated layout shortens the length of traffic flow, saves on infrastructure investment, improves the efficiency of land use, and creates more public open space. All buildings in the Sichuan Fine Arts Institute grew together, following the terrains. The ecology of the site is preserved. Many new campuses are built in hilly areas. The idea of centralized planning works well in the terrain. Centralized planning are also easily making the buildings and the environment to achieve harmony. Compact campus is a planning concept that was put forward as a way to deal with low-density suburban sprawls. Compared to concentrated layout, a compact campus further improves the efficiency of land use, reduces the cost of infrastructure, and thus preserves more resources. It is said it is the longest building in Asia. It is about 571 meters long. And all students study and make their experiment in this single building. Climate adaptation in campus planning is to minimize dependence on conventional energy consumption and use appropriate technologies to take advantage of the natural elements such as the sun, wind, temperature, humidity to create a comfortable living environment. Campus layouts and architectural forms respond to the climate conditions in different regions. In China, the prevailing wind comes from the southeast in summer and the northwest in winter. Campus planning takes into the consideration of this environmental characteristic, benefiting from the southeastern breeze and protecting against north winter wind. Chinese campus planning usually adopts a traditional courtyard layout, which has numerous benefits. Respecting the environment roots deep in Chinese tradition. Construction must maintain and utilize the existing topography and reduce damage to the ecological environment. Buildings must be integrated into the nature. It's not easy to find buildings in the Chinese traditional drawing. Maybe you can find in the center, here, and there. It's not easy to find, but it's a Chinese tradition. to respect for the environment. The tradition is still inherited by contemporary designers. Campus planning always tries to keep the original natural landscape. Buildings are designed with a moderated scale and are in harmony with the nature. For planning in the mountain environment, the rational layout is to follow the trend of mountain form. So it's easy to find. The first one is more appropriate in the mountain terrain. Chongqing Institute of Technology has a flexible layout, which conforms to the up and downs of the mountains. It retains the original valley and the rainwater system. Zhejiang University is located within the wetland area. The planning effort was try to reserve wetland totally. The site of Shenyang Architectural University once was a large tract of paddy fields. The university makes a green investment and created a unique landscape by reserving paddy fields. Students go to class through the paddies. They also study and research in them. Students enjoy the urban and the rural life in it, especially during spring cultivation and the fall harvest. If you are invited to be the guest to the university, you will receive a special gift, a bag of rice. And some words are printed in the bag. Cultivate rice, cultivate mind. It's very fun. The development of a university is a continuous and organic process. There's often no ultimate ideal state. Therefore, a sufficient flexibility should be considered in the beginning of the campus planning. Universal module design are often adopted in Chinese campus buildings. It has strong adaptability and possibilities in dividing interior space. Sustainable campus planning must guide future development and thus prevent possible chaos from haphazard development. The network growth mode provides a clear context for future construction. Cell growth mode makes it possible so that various building groups grow like cell division. The new growth is always included in the overall framework of the campus. The development of the campus contains flexible and unified at the same time. The building with close functional liaison are often planned together as a cell group. This strategy is also beneficial to the campus pedestrian system. Campus planning should be people-oriented. It should consider and respect the material and the spiritual needs of users to be consistent with human behavior and focus on the emotional feelings of users. Campus can be divided into 3 parts: exercise area, teaching area, and the residential area. But now the Chinese campus are very larger than before. It's very reasonable to use traditional triangular layout in small campus. But when the size of campus becomes very large, the traditional layout is no longer appropriate. West campus of Zhejiang University is a very large campus. It is about 2.6 kilometers from east to west, and 1.7 from north to south. Compound layout is used in the planning. It's very important to take the principle of separation of pedestrian and vehicular traffic to ensure a safe, pleasant environment of walking. Ring road system can reduce the cross of pedestrian and vehicular traffic. Vehicles run in the outer ring road and the internal part are mainly used for walking system. Through shared elevated ground floor, we can achieve the goal that separate pedestrian and vehicular traffic in 3 dimensions. It makes the walking transportation convenient, safe, and comfortable. The various levels of the interaction space is essential in universities. The campus needs to provide different levels of communication space to meet the requirements of the teachers and students. Campus culture is formed through a long period of time. Sustainability of campus culture is a prominent issue in the new campus planning. Shenyang Architecture University moved to a new site. Memory would be lost as a result of the demolition of the old site. Therefore, old gate and statues were relocated in the new campus. The cost was covered by the donation from the alumni. The same condition was occurred in Zhongshan University. Zhongshan University set up a new campus in the university city. In order to carry forward the campus memory, a copy of the memorial arch was built in the new campus. Sustainable development includes not only the protection of the ecological environment, but also the human culture. To inherit a traditional culture is the responsibility of contemporary planners. In the planning of Jiangnan University, the designers transformed the campus into a poetic water town, where waterways connect every building. A diverse pedestrian system are laid out between land and river. As a result, a modern campus with an oriental taste is created. The ancient Chinese scholars were fond of making his own home as a private garden. Many such gardens together constitute a unique garden city. The planning idea of Zhejiang University is just a campus garden. Many traditional landscaping techniques are used in the campus. The construction of Chinese university becoming a prime example to the world, how to maintain the cultural traditions and achieve sustainable future development at the same time. Growth of higher education institutions promotes the sustainable development of cities. Through resource sharing, colleges and universities enrich urban culture and help to drive local economic growth. Beijing University Gymnasium was used also as an Olympic badminton hall. A university city is formed by a number of institutions, which is the ideal place for resource sharing. Sharing takes place in 3 levels. The purple part is just the city level. And the dark purple part are the university city level. It's shared by different campuses. And in each campus also have their campus level sharing. In the planning of a university city, colleges and universities are usually bundled with a high-tech park to promote collaborations. As a result, a university city combines teaching, research, and industrial productions, becomes an integral part of the city, and brings about the industrial upgrading of the city. A university can have influence on the positioning of the city's long-term development. Most university cities are located in the areas where future growth will take place. Here is in Guangzhou, and the Guangzhou University City is just in the middle one. And it's just in the middle of the old town and the new town. The construction of a new campus will inevitably bring about the migration of local residents. In the planning of Guangzhou University City, 4 villages were preserved. Eventually, they were integrated into the new community. Huge population of the university city and a long-term stable consumer group provide adequate employment opportunities for the local residents. The planning of the Sichuan Fine Arts Institute explores a symbiotic mode of development between the local residents and the school. These local residents maintain their lifestyle by exchanging agricultural products and labor services with the institute. They become an integral part of the university. So, in the university, you can find cattle, pigs, chicken, can be seen everywhere in the university. At last, I use a smiling face to end my lecture. Thank you.
Our second speaker from India had got delayed with the airport and airplanes and visas, and we thought he might actually arrive in time this morning. He still might, you never know. So we're going to make some quick changes to provide him a little bit extra time in case he's able to arrive in time. Ying had very graciously offered to offer her translation services in the case that people have some questions for Kai. I was a little bit nervous of answering questions in English on the fly, but Ying and, if necessary, Anne said she might help out as well. So if you come back up to the stage, Kai and Ying, and folks have questions about the development of campuses in China, now's a great opportunity.
I'm sorry for my poor English. Thank you for your patience. Please.
It seems as if you have strong coordination between different universities in China, and the planning between universities is coordinated. Is that right? And if so, is there a mechanism or a parent body that does that kind of coordination between universities?
In China, every university are planned in advance. Especially in the university city, I think maybe everyone of you are puzzled in the Chinese university city is very different from European and America. It's also planned in advance. So, for example, in Guangzhou University City, as I showed, a very in the island, and it is an international competition in China, and many countries' designers take part in the competition, and the island was designed in advance, and it also have nearly 10 or 12 universities in the university city, and the planning in advance in the whole master plan. Then every campus planned separately by different, hosted by different campus. I think maybe. Thank you.
I'm struck by the wonderful diversity of form that you showed us, a beautiful presentation. But I've seen hundreds of applications from students from China, and their curriculum is all the same. The Ministry of Education controls curriculum across all of higher education. So I want to speak, how diverse is the curriculum, the content, and what students can teach, learn in these various universities?
Oh, you asked a good question Very good question. I'm sorry for my English. Now in China, the diverse education is also emphasis in China. Maybe you know in China all the educational administration in the ministry also have a strict regular to the different campuses, different universities. But every university also try to make their specific characteristics in China, and they also make a big connection, make their connections to European, to America, and wants to change a little. So it's also diverse in China. It's different, but now in university city is very special. And the students in the one campus, in the one university, also have a chance to study in another university, to study, it means sharing. It's also valuable for students. Also in my city, Wuhan, there are about 30 universities in the city. Yeah, and also some 8, the most good university support the support system for students to choose to make their credits in different campus is also available in China. Thank you.
Yes, you've experienced a growth from 3 to 22 million students over 13 years, and in area 144 to 746 million square meters. I'd like to ask you if the standard Chinese university is does it have a standard size, or do they vary very much in size?
The scale depends on, it's very different. And also there are many small universities. But now the Chinese university become larger and larger. Just now you can see each of, I talk about the Zhejiang University is a very big city. And I talk about two planning in it. It's the east part of Zhejiang University. And also this, the download one is also the west part of Zhejiang University. It's very, very big, very big. So it depends on, and I just talk about the scale. It's 20.6 kilometers length. And in China, the enrollment expansion taking place in 1999, and the rapid progress just before, after that. For example, in my university, it's about 10,000 students enrollment every year. It's very big.
We showed some of these numbers a couple of years ago too. It's just amazing how fast the growth has been. The government's been very aggressive, increasing the number of universities and the number of students. Do you know if this growth is reaching a maximum, or what is the goal in terms of the number of universities and the number of university students at this point?
And the rapid development in China just because of the policy. The government thinks it's better for more students can learn in the university, and the policy was issued in 1999. Then you can see the rapid progress in China from that year. And in 1999, it's the key point. And from up to now, it also continued the trend, but maybe present years it slowed down, maybe to the high point. Yeah, because it's also 10 years ago, it's very difficult for Chinese students to study in the university. It's very difficult, but now it's very easy. It's very easy, and more students can come to the university. So you can see the expandation of the Chinese campus rapidly so quickly. I know in China, a design institute, the name is Hualan University City, Hualan Design Institute. He designed about 200 campus. It's unimaginable. Yeah, and you also can see in 1997, only 1,020 universities, but in 2010, it improves to the 2,358 campus. It increased very quickly. So I can say the construction never seen in the world, everywhere.
Faculty, can you keep up with producing enough high advanced degrees to fill the faculty in these places?
But the faculty can't improve so quickly. Yeah, so I am also a professor in a famous university in China. Teachers, the number of teachers doesn't increase, but students come more and more. So I feel very tired. Very tired. When I was a student, I only one teacher and 8 students. But now, one teacher, 18 students. Also, it's a problem. But I think it's also valuable for the country because more and more students can acquire higher education in the university. It's also sustainable for the country. Thank you. Hey, please.
So the growth is amazing in enabling more students to go to university. Because the growth is so large, is there any thought to regionally the university sharing any resources like laboratories or high performance computing centers or athletics facilities to to minimize some of the carbon growth? Are there any thoughts to that?
In fact, for the conference, I prepared about 100 slides for the conference, but Steve only gave me 30 minutes. And before I came to the presentation, he told me, you only 23 minutes. So I have to cut off many slides. In fact, there are many good planning in China, but I have to cut them off with my tears. About the sharing, also I have something to show you. Because I don't know how to use Apple laptop. Sorry. For sharing, resource sharing is is considered these years for Chinese universities. Institution sports conference and academic facilities are open to the public and have become venues for important public events. And just now, here is the Beijing University, and its gymnasium also opened for the Olympic Games. Under the same condition also occurred in many Chinese universities. And the gymnasium also opened for the public. And especially the idea of the university city, the most emphasis is the sharing resources. And if you're in the university, if you have a student ID, you can go every library of the university city, and you can eat at every campus restaurant with your student's ID, and you can rent your bicycle with your ID, and it's free to rent only within 1 hour. It's very useful for students. And now maybe it's because of the time limitation. I can't show the old campus planning in China. It's very different from the present. And long time ago, the sports facilities can't open to the public, only used by the students and the faculty. But now all the now present planning, the stadium also located in the suburb, located on the border of the university, makes it available for the public to use it. But library is not open to public because too many students in the university, and the books number is not enough for students. So maybe it's this time. Emily.
It seems like the universities are really just like a model for this new sustainable development and the sustainable urban planning. Has there been a lot of buy-in from the cities and the cities that these universities are located in, and has there been replication of these sustainable urban design plans? Or do you see potential for that?
Yes, of course. I think there are many experience in the campus planning, also adopted for other urban designers to use in the sustainability for the city. About community also, I think is different from American community construction, because maybe. Some of you don't know about the Chinese campus. It has a definite border surrounded by the wall. It's different from MIT or Harvard. It's open to the public, but very different. Because for a long time, Chinese people think university is a very important place for people to learn in there, and they think the university should be silent, should be safe. It's a very sand place, so they use walls to surround it and then don't open to the public. But now, many universities try to change the condition. For example, the Guangzhou University City, it has no wall, but a river around it. But it has changed. It has changed. And in the announcement, in the advertisement of the University City of Guangzhou, it announced that we have no war. Maybe you think it's very normal in America, but in China it's very abnormal. I think it's also the attempt to keep contact with the public. Thank you. Thank you, Ying.
So I just want to say that I think clearly there's a lot of curiosity in the room about China, and I'm really glad that Kai agreed to come and give us a peek into his part of the world. And I hope at future ISCN meetings we can do more of this. It's for me, it's some of the more interesting things to understand what's going on in the parts of the world with explosive population growth. So our speaker from India is not yet here. Like I said, there's still a chance that he may arrive. We'll just go to our planned coffee break, which starts now until about 10:30, and then we're going to turn the floor over to universities in Singapore and at Harvard to take a look at the future, what's coming down the pike at the next ISCN meeting. So we'll see you back here in about a half an hour.
Before we do that, two small announcements. One is for those who have filled in the questionnaires up here, or for those who haven't done that yet. The little incentive is like a sports helmet to be put like on a desk. So this is a raffle prize. We're going to give it out at 12 noon. Another quick thing, as we wait for the last people to come in, I want to make one quick announcement for something going on in Latin America, which is one of the regions we are still expanding into. There's a conference in Passive Houses, Passive Architecture next November in Peru. And one, if you can just stand up. If anybody has questions about this conference, might want to come there, please go and speak to one. Thanks very much.
I would like to announce that in November, there will be a conference called PLEA. PLEA, it's a Passive Low Energy Architecture. This year's conference will be in Lima. And it's a conference which takes place every year, and well, as you from the title, it's passive low energy architecture is the topic. If somebody is interested, you can. There's a webpage, plea2012.pe.
Okay, thanks very much, Juan. So it's a real pleasure that we have the hosts of the next two conferences here. We've never planned so far ahead, so that's something that is really a progress. We've seen before that we started in Europe. The first three conferences were actually in Switzerland, then went to Asia and back to Europe. So the rationale for having the next two conferences in Singapore and Harvard is first that we want to expand the ISCN membership in Asia and also get more exchange going by that between our American, European, Asian members. So Singapore is a great opportunity to get this done. It's a hub within Asia. So we're looking forward to have Chinese, Australian, and other Asian participants meet our European and American members. And the year after that, we're going back to this country. Most of our ISCN members in North America at this point, also most of the institutions that are kind of sort of natural fits for the ISCN in the future, surprise, surprise, are clustered in the West and East Coast. It's just how this country is made up, mostly. And so because this first meeting was on the West Coast, it was natural to then go to the East Coast and be in Harvard and have the other North England or Northeastern institutions somehow collaborate and really getting a good networking up there. That being said, I'm very happy that we have from Singapore Joe Mullinix, who is the Deputy President for Administration at NU Singapore, one of our early members, and Amy Ho, the Director of the Office of Sustainability. The floor is yours.
Hi, good morning. I'm Amy, and I'd just like to take this opportunity to introduce a little bit more about Singapore and where the ISCN conference will be held next year, as well as throw up some suggestions of topics that we may cover, and take this opportunity to also welcome any feedback and thoughts so that we can make the conference a meaningful and successful one for you as well. So just a little bit about Singapore. Yesterday you heard Ruri speak about where Indonesia is. Singapore is just above Indonesia. We're a small island state. We're all packed in this area of about 700 square kilometers, and with just over 5 million people all on that island. As you can see, it's representative of a city that's growing very fast and also experiencing, substantial economic growth. The National University of Singapore is the country's oldest university. We're about 157 years old, and we have, we have gone through many logos, as you can see, about 6 of them. And right now, currently, we are a comprehensive university with more than 37,000 students, 16 faculties, and over 16 schools or faculties, and over 9,000 staff members. We have 2 campuses. Our main campus is in Kent Ridge, and it's located on a ridge with large greenery. Makes it a little bit difficult for biking sometimes, but nonetheless, we hope to make it as pleasant and sustainable learning and teaching grounds for our students and staff. We have a small so-called satellite campus within Singapore, and that's where the NUS actually started, and that's where we had our roots as a medical college. NUS also houses 9 research institutes related to sustainability, and in fact we have a joint research program on energy and environmental sustainability solutions for megacities. It's a joint project with the Shanghai Jiao Tong University. We also have a joint program on livable cities with ETH Zurich. So that's an example of how we build collaborative partnerships with international universities, and that's a model that we'll like to see more of as well. Because of the emphasis of research in NUS, we also on campus that includes electric vehicles as well as solar energy. NUS actually houses one of the largest solar energy research institute in the world. And of course, we don't forget our core mission of educating, giving them the experience that they need to find as well as create jobs in this sector. Involving them so that they understand that they are also a solution they can also be part of the solution to climate change. We spoke about, buildings and green building standards in Working Group 1, and NUS to date has about 15 to 16 Green Mark certified buildings. That's a Singapore certification for energy efficient buildings. And for ISCN conference next year, what we'd like to do is really look at our region, look at some of the issues that could be of special interest in the region, look at some of the issues that universities within the region as well as globally face, and then sort of put them all together, and hopefully we can come up with an interesting program that you might find useful as well. So these are some of our thoughts on the themes. We hear a lot from the participants about the sharing of best practices. What we'd like to add on is perhaps an additional focus on hot and humid climates, for example, in Asia, or even in certain parts of Africa and South America, and even Florida. Right? Opportunities to also explore, how sustainable campuses can be microcosm of sustainable cities. I mean, if you look at what NUS is to Singapore, and that's really a kind of a mirror image, although on a different scales, about how we want to develop a sustainable environment. And because we are in Asia Pacific, and that sort of gives us a platform for us to engage more actively the various network members within that region, and also, as what Burns mentioned, attract more members from that region as well. At least give them a taste of what is ISCN conference all about. Yeah. And because of that, we're suggesting an additional, like a pre-workshop, whereby we can focus on certain issues that universities who are just starting on the sustainability journey, or who are in the early stages of, ramping up their campus sustainability program would find useful. And that could, really look at more details about, toolkits and to how to go about building a campus sustainability program, have a platform of whereby experienced ISCN member universities could be the experts who can, hold clinics with universities who really would want to, find out more or have specific issues that or challenges that they're dealing with. Yeah. And these are some, I won't go through them, but these are just food for thought about, what we could discuss at next year's ISCN conference. This is distilled in part from the feedback that we've been gathering, from the ISCN members in the past, as well as some of the discussions at this meeting. This is not cast in stone yet, so we really welcome your inputs, and maybe at the end of the session, when we're talking about ISCN priorities as well, we can come back to this. All right? Yeah. So this is what I mentioned about. It will be a typical 3-day program for the main conference, but what we're suggesting is a day 0, whereby I have a side workshop for a smaller group of universities, and more details will follow. So do check out the ISCN website in the days to come. My contact details, in case you would like to, give any input directly to me or to Bernd, we'll definitely welcome that. And just as Steve started with a video, I'd like to end with one. Yeah, if you can just make us. Yeah. It's a plug for Singapore.
Located at the heart of fascinating Southeast Asia, Singapore is a dynamic city with a unique blend of diverse cultures, people, and experiences. With century-old shophouses, breathtaking skyscrapers, hip enclaves, and lush rainforests coexisting and blending into each other, you can find in this lion city a landscape of diversity and harmony. Modern, cosmopolitan, energetic, eclectic, and colorful. This is Singapore.
Yeah, maybe I'll just add that we clearly would love to welcome all of you. We have in fact learned from the sessions yesterday, and Amy and I did a very quick survey because we thought that would be very. We know that a lot of people here were uncomfortable, I thought, with manipulation perhaps in the survey, so I should tell you it was a very small survey. 100% of the people who were participating at this meeting were planning to come to Singapore. So you might want to know why I'm wasting my time and your time since the conversion rate. We were worried about maybe survey error, given the size of the survey. So anyway, we do welcome all of you. We think that Singapore is an interesting place. We can guarantee you warm weather. We were a little concerned. You did hear this morning about the 2% of the food that we produce ourselves. And the good news is that within that 2% is Tiger beer. And the Tiger Brewery is the only thing that we have to offer that's comparable. And then we began to wonder, the brewery doesn't have the view, and it doesn't have live music. But then we remembered karaoke. We have much better karaoke. So we do hope that many of you will take the opportunity to come to Singapore to explore a little bit about NUS. We'll try to, I think there may be lessons to be learned from tropical architecture. And so we will hopefully give you some insights in a small city-state. There's actually a lot more opportunity for integration, integrative planning, and so that might also be an interest. For those of you who are a little bit nervous about a trip to Asia, Singapore is many people believe Asia light. It's very easy. It's like Hong Kong. It's very easy city to visit. But for those of you who have spent a lot of time in Asia, it's a great place to jump off from and visit, particularly in South Asia, practically any place. And we have, then I was trying to remember, where do we excel relative to Eugene? We have a better airport. We have connecting flights, direct connecting flights from almost every city in India. So next time our Indian colleagues will be there. Anyway, thank you. And we do really encourage feedback because we'd like the session to respond to your needs. Thanks.
I like both the parts about the topical architecture, which I think is really an enrichment of our network. I also like the karaoke idea. You might remember from last year's Gothenburg meeting of the ISCN song, so we should practice that before we come to Singapore. We are looking ahead at the Harvard meeting. Heather Henriksen and Jack Spangler will talk about some of their ideas, which are very first ideas, and we kind of blend the discussion about these next two meetings and discussion about the ISCN development in general. So there's no rush about this. Between now and 12 noon, we can really think ahead. What do we want to accomplish as a network for the next meetings, for our web resources? What do we want to make happen here?
And I think the most important thing is to really hear from all of you, so that we create two concurrent meetings that really meet your goals and objectives and get terrific participation, as Bernd said, sort of, I think, also continue to evolve the mission and the leveraging of us collectively and our networks together to really have some impact. So Jack's got a couple of slides of Cambridge. Just two quick things. One, I think that, as Bert said, the Northeast and Harvard, sitting in Cambridge or Boston, there's a wealth of universities and colleges nearby. Of course, Dartmouth, Yale, others. And I think what we're proposing to do is to also have those networks collaborate with us in creating the program and be participatory while it is held in Cambridge, so that you get a broader group of universities' participation, certainly from faculties and even presidents potentially of colleges, so that we are also growing our network, and it's a leverage point for us, but growing our network not just of the sustainability and environment faculty that we work with currently, but others in different disciplines and basically drawing them into the work that we're doing. So those are some of the things that we're thinking about. I think that it breaks down into two things, and I'll stop speaking here in a second and let Jack do his slides. But I think what we really want to come back, I'll even write on the board, is really just have a visioning discussion with you of what you'd like to see. I think, as you said, we have a unique opportunity to plan not only what we're doing next year, but what we're doing between now and then what we're doing in the interim. So we actually have an opportunity to also set some goals, I think, together of what we're going to accomplish to ultimately have some impact and some deliverables, both in Singapore and then in Cambridge. And I think, again, the two sort of things that Amy and I spoke about is, one sort of the vision, the goals, and the content piece. And then the other piece that we're also very willing to hear feedback on is more of the format to facilitate meeting of those goals and objectives. So I know people found the working group sessions could have gone on for an entire day. So, you know, maybe we expand those discussions, and maybe that's where some of these goals and objectives come out of for us. And again, you know, maybe we bring in some additional faculty or presidents that we maybe haven't seen as many of in the past as well. So just some framing ideas to sort of get us thinking, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jack, but really looking forward to what all of you have to say in the Q&A.
I really like this idea of, you know, Singapore is the metaphor for our world. It's hotter and wetter in many places, and so if you have wonderful regional architects like Ken Yang, and if you could get him there and his following and really set up how do we deal with this as a society, urbanized society would be really a useful thing to do. So podium to a faculty member is that we speak in lecture units of 50 minutes, which is actually 1 microcentury if you do the calculation. So I'm going to have to do this in 1/10 of a microcentury. But I thought just in case you didn't know how to find your way to Harvard, I wanted to point out that if you're in the galaxy anywhere, you locate the Milky Way and go way out to the extreme end to one of the little condensed clumps of matter, and you'll find our solar system. And the door is open provided we get past the end of the Mayan calendar, which I put up here. And so when I was lecturing to students recently and said, well, you know, maybe you don't have to study for your finals because the end of the world is on the 21st of December of this year. So if that doesn't happen, we'll be in Singapore. People know what well, it turns out, according to NASA, that's not true. The planets do not align all in a linear direction between our sun and the center of the galaxy, of our solar system, right down to our Milky Way. So the way to Harvard is find your way to the third rock, this planet Earth, with its very fragile and shallow envelope of atmosphere above us. And then head towards Boston, and this is our coastal city with the downtown urban area being transformed and built up. And out the road here is the Charles River, and if you come, is this tracing on this? Yeah, and you see the Massachusetts Bridge that takes you by MIT Junior College on the way to Harvard down the road. They're not here, so I can say, I'd say it anyway, I don't care. Yes, I was looking just at you. So looking back at our coast line in our city, hovering somewhere over my house in Watertown, is the Harvard Business School and the athletic fields and the beginning of the dormitories along the Charles River, and off to the left here, I guess it would be your left too, is start of our campus. But we have a beautiful historic city, rich in its parks and its architecture and its remembrance of the past, and rich in its political heritage as well. And so we want you to come and enjoy that. And I'm so glad we're in Eugene now, because the temperatures in Boston are going to be 98 today. We're going to be like Singapore today in Boston. So it'll be this time of year, but 2 years from now, and maybe we should take a raffle on what the CO2 levels will be if we're at 400 now. A little sobering thought, what will it be like in 2 years? But we have this beautiful colonial Georgian architect that many of our streets are just really intriguing and inviting, and here's the magnolia trees in bloom. And early this year, a full month early than they normally bloom, up and down Commonwealth Ave and Beacon Street and Newbury Street. And then if you go out a little further, you find Harvard Square, and that's a transportation hub, and right there is the beginning of the Harvard Yard, the campus, walled off, by the way, but the doors are open all the time to the public. So we would welcome you to Harvard. I thought I'd do a little quick trip through that gate, and we'll go. So here's the campus in the Boston-Cambridge area, and we'll go through the gate right here, and I'll take you a quick trip around the yard, see the Science Center, and maybe we'll have a dinner, meetings in Annenberg Hall. You will think you were in Harry Potter set when you're in some of these scenes around Boston. So right inside the yard is Old Harvard Hall. I think, Claire, you probably took a class right in here is where we teach one of our big introductory environmental management courses. And just turn to your right and you look into the quad, and we'll head over to that building and the statue in front of it. But it's just full of students and visitors and parents and people from Cambridge taking advantage of our summer and fall days, and you'll certainly be part of that. And you'll have to come by and visit the statue of John Harvard and rub his foot for good luck, and this keeps at least his toe shiny. The rest of it is well worn and well aged. But then just walking around campus, these are some of the residential dorms. Across a road that's suppressed in a courtyard is our Science Center, and a beautiful fountain that sort of cools off that environment. Looking to Memorial Hall, where Annenberg Dining Hall is. All the freshmen eat in this one dining hall. And it looks a throwback to England and its Roman and Greek architecture that you'll see around the campus. Now we'll come back in through the gates, see some more of the dormitories and lecture halls as we walk into the Tricentennial Theater, where graduation takes place every May. And here we are ready to go into this other quad in the interior of Harvard Yard. We pass on the left Memorial Hall, and I was married many years ago in Memorial Chapel in that place, and graduated, saw my son graduate from the Tricentennial Theater. And this is where we had Al Gore come to our campus when Drew Faust announced the commitment to greenhouse gas reductions, and this place was full of thousands of people, students and staff, all celebrating this very important event. And you'll see the banners of Harvard. And those banners are being supplemented and being replaced by other symbols of the transformation that's happening on our campus. So green is the new crimson, which, if you think about it, you mix those together and you end up brown. So I don't know what that says. So we welcome to you to Harvard and the tradition. So I just want to say things that, for discussion points, things that we might think to do together as a society, as a group of individuals that care deeply about this thing. So I just had 2 points that I wanted to share. One is what I see happening in a transformation in how we should be rethinking about sustainability. And I think we got some of this formula right from the first Rio. It's about materials and economics and, of course, society. But I think we need to sharpen that definition. So what I'm really resonating to is this new thinking that we really ought to be explicit about human capital. How do we measure the well-being on our campus, of our staff, of our students, of our faculty, of our community? How do we have a positive effect? Not just be neutral, not just make people satisfied, but how do we be positive about this? And then natural capital. And it's not just natural capital services, but what nature does to nourish us and how we really should bring. And I feel it on this campus. This campus is gorgeous. And they have a reverence for the trees and for their geological climate setting of this region. It really is remarkable. But how many of our places don't quite get that? It's an afterthought. But it's also those those factors times knowledge, and I say it's the scientific knowledge that is under such assault nowadays, but it's general knowledge too, and appreciation. And then it's institutions with commitment and institutions with integrity. And I think if we figure out how to add to how people come to understand a redefining of what sustainability is, I think we've put a challenge to ourselves that I think we would have accomplished a lot. The other thing is that we might want to do together is study our dormitories. We're doing this as part of an NSF study. We would make our protocols available to any other investigator that wants to do it, build a database and do some meta-analysis across multi-centers. And, you know, what are dormitories about? They're about sleeping, they're about cognitive performance, they're about socialization and social integration. And yet, when you look at the sleep patterns of kids on our campuses, it's anything but sleeping. And we think design and not thinking about this as design has led to the deterioration of the basic fundamental function of what dorms should be. So it's an opportunity to possibly study it. And then I'd offer this other new conceptual thinking called energy points. How do we look at a combined metric that takes our primary energy use, the energy that goes into the water we use, the energy that goes into the waste that we dispose, the energy that goes into our commuting and transportation, and combine it into a single metric. So now we can understand it. So there's a longer deck of slides that I'll leave for you to put up on the website and share with people, but I'll just pick off some highlights of that. So here is Ramon and Memo, my two doctoral students, going into Old Quincy House to take in and distribute these little micro sensors to get thermal comfort, to get noise, to get carbon dioxide, ventilation measurements, and they're doing this in a couple of our dorms now. And I'm absolutely shocked at the level of reporting of stress, anxiety, depression in this population of bright young kids. And it really, and I checked it out with our University Health Services, and they said, yes, this is exactly what they see. So we thought we'd be looking at allergies and respiratory ailments and stuff, but I think we're on to something that is quite fundamental, and it would be worth seeing if other campuses have similar things. Energy points, as I said, it's a combined metrics that tries to bring all of these other things that actually consume energy, and how do we express them into one unit. And this group, a little startup company in Cambridge, came up with this concept of energy points equals 1 gallon of gas. So the energy embodied in a gallon of gas gives you an energy point. And now you can measure, it's a dashboard, just like people that drive Priuses, you know, and we pay for gas. We know how many miles we go on a gallon of gas. So it's a wonderful way because it's in the common experience of everybody. So the idea is if you take one energy point, how much energy do you get out of it? And after you discount it and the stuff, you get about 35 kilowatts from a gallon of gasoline after you sort of lose some of the things along the way. And that's great because that translates to 9 kilograms of carbon dioxide. So one metric can combine lots of meaningful information and things. So you can look at this for an example of the units. You look at it in terms of coal. So here you start with coal, and by the time you get coal finally to a usable end product through electrical generation, you get 8 kilowatt hours. So for one energy unit input, you get 8 kilowatt hours out. And then you can compare across fossil fuels and renewables. You go all the way up to wind power. For one energy input, you get 80 useful kilowatt hours. So then you can compare across countries, across the U.S. and other places. You find places that are very efficient, and you go into Illinois and Ohio because of their energy mix, you're only getting 9 kilowatt hours per energy point. So you know where your energy is coming from. You can now start looking at the impact of your buildings across this. Europe, you go from 40 if you're in Norway to 8 if you're in Poland. So this is a great way to start to combine what the grid is providing in these useful units. You can do the same thing for water. This is how much energy it takes to put a gallon of water out into the system in Cambridge. It's the transport, it's the cleaning, it's the cleaning for delivery of portable water, it's the cleaning for wastewater removal, so you know what that is worth. And you can then look across the country where there's water scarcities. And so that unit of energy for water for Cambridge is very different than if it's coming out of the Rio Grande or out in Santa Fe or out in the West. So there are ways of looking at what is important to your campus based on this important resource, all in energy terms. So we've took 30 buildings at Harvard to try this out, to look at how, in this one figure across the top, it looks at electricity use and it looks at its energy steam use, and you can see, of course, lower in the summer, higher in the winter. And so we can profile buildings. Water turns out to be very little in our energy use on campus. It's an important thing to do, but it's very little in terms of energy use. And our waste is also fairly low. We haven't included hazardous waste. That will be the next thing we do, and I think that'll be a big impact. So quickly, you can take these energy points across these kind of facilities and say, all right, now I can compare across their usage, but I can compare by square footage. And I can reorder my usage or observations of how that building's performing in square footage. All of that builds to a very useful tool that says if I have a set of strategies to reduce energy, and here, whether it's steam or electricity, I can now say, if they're the same net present value, I can now compare where do I get more energy savings. And it's a lot smarter to do this thing in this building versus the same net present value of another activity in another building. And so you can start to make some more sense out of how you invest in projects. So I'm going to leave this up. There's really good academic work to do here. Not only to apply it to your region, your campus, but to really get at some of these other, how do we do hazardous waste and pull it into these units? And how do we put commuting in the proper way? So I'm going to leave, like I said, the whole slide deck up so you can think about it and go and look at the website. All right.
Okay, thanks, Heather and Jack. I think we should be really thinking about in the next 45 minutes till we amble to lunch, both what we would like to do in the next two conferences and also what you would like to see, and more importantly, what you all would like to do within the ISCN. What does everybody want to contribute? What do we need? How can we share things? And I'd be very happy if Heather and Amy or the four of you would like to lead this discussion. I'll pitch in where useful and needed. We have somebody taking notes. And this will feed both in the planning of the next two meetings and in our planning of the ISCN that we'll discuss with our advisory board how to move forward.
So we have Tina, would you like to?
Yeah, thank you all. I mean, I'm quite curious to fly all around this globe and increase my global footprint again. But nevertheless, at the beginning, I think Dan was it or Steve was it who showed the map of our membership, and there was a big gap in Africa and also a big gap in Russia. And I would say one of the major challenges would be, in particular, if we consider ourselves as an international campus network, really to take an effort to include the African campuses, not only South Africa, but maybe also Sub-Saharan Africa or the areas which were not that relative, and try to bring them into the network. And also Russia seems to be, or the former GUS countries seem to be a gap in our network. That would be great. And particularly if we have Singapore now, that Russia is not that far away, but also from the like you said, the tropical area could be a link to the African campus sites. That would be a big wish from my side.
Okay, thank you.
And Bert mentioned
Yes.
exceptional parts. We don't have very many people from South America.
But any comments too, Amy put together sort of a framing of some of the content pieces too, of thematically goals and objectives for actually when we come together. So what will be the topics or the themes, you know, what will be coming out of all of these working groups. So I think the other piece we wanted to focus on again is, you know, first, what's the vision, what are the goals, what are sort of the themes of what we really want to be discussing for that transformation. And then secondly is more of the format pieces. So one is certainly inclusion and making it a really, truly global, you know, network. And so we have some people that in the next year we could probably collectively find some great folks to integrate. Rosie.
I think there's a tension between covering a lot of topics at a shallow depth and particularly at varying levels of sort of proficiency or we're all at various places on each road in sustainability, so there's a tension between that and going deep on certain topics. For example, organizational change or leadership skills building. And I also think that plays out in bringing key high-profile faculty into the conversation from each of our universities and from different disciplines. If we stay at the shallow level, we have less chance, potentially, of bringing in faculty from different disciplines, or I wonder if we do.
Yeah, I have a similar comment. So I like your suggestion, Amy. Thank you very much of the topic success factors for integrating sustainability into research and teaching. So it's the working group 3 topic, and I think to frame it in terms of identifying success factors is great. So we'll definitely take that on. And it also talks to this plan of looking at both strategically, the level, and projects. What I'm wondering, I mean, I think ISCN is unique in terms that it combines practitioners and academics. And I'm wondering whether it might help if we make that more explicit and if we somehow in the programming of our working groups really juxtapose more conceptual approaches with practical projects that are happening on the ground and really see how we can improve the enrichment of each by juxtaposing them explicitly. It's been happening implicitly, but sometimes it also has caused tensions. When some of us think, oh, we'd like to do more conceptual work, rethinking, reframing what it all means, others get itchy. Whereas we think, well, but to make real meaning and to have a future, to know, give it meaningful direction in the future, we need it. So I'm wondering whether there's something there we can make explicit in our agendas.
Sure. I think making it explicit, could be easily done, but this next level would be how do you translate that into a format within the conference that makes it, relevant and interesting for, at least the majority of the participants. Yeah.
This idea of going back to basics, rethinking sustainability, but maybe we can do that on these both levels. And the book, we can think about the book.
That's right, definitely.
And I'm happy to send you the introductory chapter that sort of sets it out conceptually now for comments. It's still time to include other perspectives in it.
Yeah. Actually, that's a really nice angle to that, in terms of topics, and then you have associated activities like the launch of the ISCN book at the same time as well. So we can probably carve out something very nice and thank you.
Last comment. Sorry, we were talking also building on our last intervention from Dartmouth. This idea with the leadership workshop, and if we both discuss it conceptually as part of the working group, but if we could tag on at the end a real 3-day workshop for those of us who feel this type of training could enhance our effectiveness. I mean, it might, and apparently there's interest Yeah, so we touched base. It emerged together in a conversation on the coffee break, but that might
just want to add something on that. We talked with the advisory committee over lunch yesterday. We have sustainability directors, we have some faculty, it would be great to go deeper. We also have, but it's kind of up and down, senior administrators. And so the question, do we have a leadership track, which needs to be shorter because these guys are very busy, for senior administrators, you know, to meet among themselves and then be exposed to director sustainability, senior faculty, and rethink, you know, the future priorities might be interesting. So we maybe think of getting some of those together in Singapore.
Question is, should we separate it or not? I would not necessarily separate it, I think.
We'll think about that.
Yeah. Some of us wear both hats.
The gentleman in the green shirt here, and then
No, since I'm faculty, I work as a professor working with teaching and research, and I've been on some of these meetings. And I think what would interest faculty to come is to bridge the campus and how to use the campus in, for example, in research, as you showed, or how to educate sustainability integrated into the curricula, because that could be very interesting. And it's also difficult for the faculty because at least many don't even know what sustainability is. To work as a bridge there, connecting the faculty with the sustainability campus work, that would be interesting.
All right, thank you.
I think it would also be very helpful to hear more about projects which have been done, pilot projects, good projects, best practice projects, which could be shown here, not just the technical side, also what led to the success, who was deciding, how were the people convinced to spend extra money, if any, and things like that. More specified on what was the goal and how could it be achieved on the management side.
Is there any question on the side? We'll take one on this.
I'm just wondering whether, as I'm quite new to this organisation, but whether as a group you had worked out where you wanted to be in 5 or 10 years' time, and whether you had done any planning backwards from there as to how to get there.
I think that's a great question. I think that the ISCN, in some ways, you know, is at a crossroads in the sense that there's been tremendous success of bringing this, you know, network together of people who are incredible and doing amazing things. And now you have all the reports and people are reporting, and you have a great deal of, you know, success and a foundation. And I think the question certainly in my mind is, how do we sort of, as you said earlier, merge these of the vision 5-10 years out with the conferences and the work that we're doing in between?
I totally agree with that. The interesting thing is, you know, this is a moving target. Sustainability in general and campus sustainability is evolving very fast. You know, some people say water is the next carbon. Maybe, you know, diversity is something that really comes into sustainability programs. We can help shape this, but we also have to stay on top of trends and just, you know, make sure that we are current and we are relevant. So we don't know what sustainability on campus will mean in 10 years. We've got some ideas what we think it should look like, but we need to align our organization with things going on externally, like Rio +20, the human capital things Jack spoke about, and make sure that we are responding to those as they come up.
So I see it as kind of it needs to be kind of flexible, organic planning process, but have those big goals there still, so that you're always adjusting to meet the big goals.
I think what is clear in our mind is there's two things that we want this network to be. We want it to be an intimate and in-depth exchange of experience rather than a big trade show and, you know, thousands of people meeting somewhere. There's room for these meetings, that's not us. We really want to work together, which also for me means we want to work more between the years. So we want to build our web resources more into platform for you all to exchange into working groups and beyond. And one of the things that we are doing is to develop sustainability reporting for universities. It's not just a data collection, but it's really telling a story what the campus wants to do, why we're doing certain things, and what we're looking out in the future. And how we position this kind of disclosure and transparency between the stars of these worlds, the GI reporting, other things going on is something that I want to observe very closely, and I want us, with all 3 working groups, to make strides over the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, it strikes me that we've heard it throughout this conference. There's sort of 2 fundamental problems, I think. One is the failure for the broader community, the public, to understand sustainability urgency. The other is how our fellow professionals, the communication to our fellow professionals. So I put out as a premise that we need tools. We need to transform the tools of communication. That's why we got interested in energy points, because no one understands BTUs and kilowatt hours, but they understand a gallon of gas at a fundamental level. They know what they pay for it. They know what utility it provides. And so if you bought a house, if you know to drive that house, it would cost you 3,000 energy points, and you buy another house that's 2,000 energy points, you can make judgment. So communication, a tool for communication. The other concept is sustainability rate of return. There's new economic thinking of how we can incorporate and monetize sustainability, the extra
need to have between higher education and the emerging green economy and blue economy, and the importance of perhaps breaking down some of the barriers that really exist between faculty, students, staff, and the emerging new economies that have to be taking root out there. In my interactions with some African colleagues, this is really what they're most passionate and interested about, is the way in which the sustainability agenda can really support development for livelihood for people. And there's a book by Guzipali around the blue economy, which is amazing, and it's such an important sort of platform, I think, for us to gather from an international perspective about the role of higher education in the emerging blue economy. And then it connects back to pretty much everything that's back on the board. But the win-win for the organisers is that once you start embracing conversations like that, you can get out there and get employers involved in helping to fund these kinds of dialogues, because they're equally invested in them. And by employer, I don't just mean large corporations, I mean government, non-profit, all of the sectors.
Thank you. Shall we take from Matthew and then Anne and Prashant?
I was intrigued by the presentations yesterday on the what was it called, predictive marketing and things like that, and whether or not that particular methodology is relevant to us. Building on Jack's point, I think that finding a mechanism to bring into the conversation ideas, methodologies, technologies that might not be part of the regular sustainability conversation, but that would have strong applicability in what it is we're trying to do would be useful. Whether that's a whole session, theme of a conference, or what, I don't know. But I did find it useful and something that we should be keeping our eyes on and figuring out how to integrate smartly into our conversations.
Just a small thing, but Jack, I can say this as an American to American, but we have a way of assuming that people think sometimes in the same way. But a gallon of gas might mean something to you. To someone else, it's irrelevant, right? So that would be kind of an interesting thing to look at as an international network. What is the way to do what you've done with energy points that can translate, whether it's to Africa or to Europe or to Asia? Because also try not to emphasize the driving thing, but it's the concept is great, and finding a way to say, okay, what does it mean in one context and another context?
Thank you. Prashant and
I just wanted to, there's one thing where as you get into Asia, there are many existing lifestyles which are already very eco-friendly. So I just wanted to suggest that in our conversation, there is no incentive to people to continue their existing lifestyle, but there is an incentive for them to reform. So how do we make sure that the people, so many people who are already leading ecologically appropriate lifestyle, do not feel that they are socially or in terms of status or modernization, in some ways, so a large section of people are at one point adapting wrong lifestyles, while a lot of money is being spent on incentivizing people correcting their lifestyles. So how do we incentivize people to continue responsible lifestyles? I just thought I'll bring it over.
That's an interesting thought.
Yeah, the funny thing is that most people in Singapore live in non-air-conditioned homes, and now we're teaching them to move to air-conditioned spaces, where we bring the temperature down to about 20 degrees, which is the record low temperature in Singapore. So it's ambient low. I mean, it's a totally crazy scenario.
Yeah. And that's maybe
there are literally a billion plus people who are in that circumstance, and if we bring them all to 20 degrees.
And spending a lot of effort trying to get them back into the natural ventilated residences, right?
That was part of the idea of the tropic
Well,
market.
yeah.
Are there things that we can learn to build buildings appropriately, so in fact we don't have to provide that as the ultimate.
So Steve and then the gentleman in white. Steve?
So I'm going to offer a slightly different tack. I've attended now 5 of the 6 ISCN conferences, and I've been to ASHI conferences, as have lots of people in the room. And my feeling at this point is that if you operate as a sustainability professional for your university, you are thoroughly and sufficiently knowledgeable about some of the things that we tend to review over and over again. So we are still talking about green buildings, which are incredibly important. But my guess is most people in the room know about the details of a green building. Just to pick one particular topic, we could say the same for recycling programs and outreach efforts to our incoming freshmen and all kinds of things. Right? There's a laundry list that's more or less been developed. And all of our universities are going to spend the next 15 or 20 years ticking off those things one by one. And at the end of it, we'll more or less be in the same place, right? So some universities will get there a little earlier, and some will get there a little bit later, and it won't be exactly the same, but we have a familiarity with that kind of stuff now. And then to an extent, there's a boredom associated with it. Not because it's boring stuff, but because we know it so well, and do we really need to spend our time in that particular way? So if the answer to that is no, and that's what I think the answer is no, we really don't need to spend our time in that particular way. What should we be spending our time on? And that's a really difficult question to answer, but my sense is that there are all kinds of other things, out-of-the-box things, and I won't try and take the time to figure out what those are just now, that would inspire us in ways that we haven't yet thought of. I have gotten to the point myself with ASHI thinking, now do I really want to spend the $3,000 or $5,000 that I have for conference travel to go to ASHI this year? This is nothing against ASHI or the ISCN next year. It's the same thing, right? We all have to make these decisions for the conferences we travel to. Or should I go to something completely different where I'm the only one representing sustainability and trying to absorb what's going on in other disciplines? And so my recommendation is that we try and become that conference, the one to which people, sustainability directors, feel like they need to attend because that's where the new stuff is coming.
So focusing on the future, where are we headed?
When we talk about, and I'm guilty of this, right? We just produced a conference where a lot of it covered familiar ground. It's difficult to invite a whole bunch, 100 people from around the world to your university and take serious risks and worry that maybe you took them out of the box in directions they didn't want to go. But we don't need to do, I don't think we don't need to do a lot of green building. We all know where those resources are. We all look at those on the web in our private time. So something different.
It's a gentleman in white, and then Tina, and then Arian, and Nancy.
I was going to bring up something pretty different, and it seems like maybe there's some response to what Steve says. I don't know. Would either of you want to add to that? Yeah, so come back to me afterwards.
It was just a short remark. We discussed this bilaterally, but there's already room for improvement if you just organize back-to-back meetings with the same issues that we're talking in different audiences. Like the hour, like ISCN, like ideally go wherever we organize. So I mean that makes things far easier. So if we have an IAO meeting and an ISCN meeting next time in Singapore, A, it's more environmentally friendly to fly once, and B, we might line up and create synergies which we could easily use. Probably we have room in the ISCN for new way of thinking while we do the more practical stuff in the IAO network or so. I mean, that's just a suggestion to be more clever in management.
So co-locating events, and as well as
Also, splitting it up in terms of interest and pitching it at the different
audiences. Yeah. Okay. Dan, you want to continue from here, or?
Sure.
Sure. Okay.
Well, I think just on kind of following on the theme of engaging, this is following on the theme of engaging more African and South American, Central American countries in the kind of new economy kind of topic. I'm just struck by something that somebody said yesterday. The Rio conference, is happening right now, and this is, someone said yesterday, this is kind of higher education is more actively engaged in that conversation now than they have been in the past. And the UN has an ongoing annual meeting of the Commission on Sustainable Development. It meets in New York City every year, and the Rio Summit is just a kind of culminating event of the World Commission on Sustainable Development that has an education caucus. And I guess I'm just, and they are very engaged with some of the issues of kind of the new economy, the role of education in kind of as a cross-cutting theme across developed countries and developing countries. And I think this is maybe more of a strategy than a topic for conversation, but I think it would be important to set some goals around a kind of some strategic alliances so that this network really is aligned very closely with the UN's Commission on Sustainable Development Education Caucus and the outcomes of the Rio Summit. And at the Rio Summit, they're focused a lot on some of these topics, particularly kind of sustainable economies and developing countries and their developing in sustainable ways, and indigenous knowledge that I think is kind of a little bit of getting back to what are the lifestyles that people are already leading in the world that we want to support. And so I think it's just, there's a strategy component, and there's also kind of some themes that relationship could help us strengthen. But I don't see any other organization really taking the higher education community and sustainability kind of as seriously as this group internationally. So it would seem that we're a natural fit to kind of be have a stronger partnership with the United Nations and the parts of the United Nations that are focused on this thing.
So just thinking along the line, so I heard this meeting more than any other meeting before, the urgency. We need to change faster. We're diverse across the globe. The role of universities, though, is everywhere nearly the same. So I'm combining this with, I think, what Liv says, the new economy. Basically, in Europe, I was just told by the chief European statistician, head of Eurostat, Walter Rademacher, he lectures on my course. He's the environmental accountant. Sustainable development is out of European policy making as a term. It's all focused on green growth. The OECD, it's the same. So combining that with our thinking themes, specificity, depth, we have this trade-off. I'm wondering, and this is just an idea, might it be worthwhile in Singapore have a big brainstorming effort to identify 2 to 3 of the most impactful trends for fast change, trends or technologies, and then focus on 2 or 3 of them in the Harvard session. So I'm wondering in terms of, for instance, smart grid, what will it lead to? Will it be adopted? I know there are all sorts of trials. I don't know whether this will be one of the things we'll be identifying in Singapore. But I know, and that would be a really interesting nexus because it's a technology that will lead to immense social change with monitoring, really changing our accountabilities in our daily lives. So that's just a suggestion. Should we brainstorm in Singapore on 2 to 3 impactful fast trends and then focus on 2 or 3 of them in Harvard?
And actually that's quite aligned with our thinking that if we now have the benefit of planning 2 conferences in advance, so it's not just we can opt for more long-term types of initiatives. So thank you. Nancy.
It's just briefly to follow along from Steve's comment and some of the others. I think what was said that what keeps us going is our intimate, international, innovative format style. So we should really continue to make precise. I like the idea of taking a topic and using it as an exemplar, but running it through different formats. And one, I think that keeps people coming. We all can go to various conferences and get more info transfer. It's the other stuff that really helps us along. I think conversations might be good to think about. Like if you took the smart grid thinking on the fly, to have some, in thinking about our partnership model, imagine you had a university leader, maybe a president, and somebody who has partnered with a community to test out smart grid and how it ran through the university research, teaching, remits. You could see and think for the community and how they thought about trade-offs. But a conversation like that and having several of us listen with the topic being an exemplar, giving them very short time and then opening it up would be a format for us maybe to consider. Because I think most of us are not getting that somewhere else. So I think if we could keep to the innovative formats, that would help keep us going.
So the contents and then the formats so that we can delve a little bit lot more in depth on some issues.
I want to cross something I'm just not really good with technology.
How do we market the next ISCN conferences to these regions or countries that would like to get more involved?
Full screen size. So I want to take some of these up and just make some inputs to mix what we're thinking in the network itself. One thing that I haven't heard so far, but I've observed in this conference, I want to throw it out there and actually want to ask for a show of hands. We all get the feeling, at least that's what I hear, we don't have time at these meetings. We want to discuss, but then we have to run. We want to present, but then we have to jump to the next lunch meeting. And I wondered, I mean, it's always, we don't have time to travel as well, but as we're here, and especially as we're in Singapore for many of us, which is a large distance, whether we should extend this meeting a little bit. For example, start at lunch, but not stop at lunch the second day, but go to the night of that day, or something like that. Just a show of hands. Who would like the meeting a little bit longer than we have had it right now? I think that seems to be the majority. So for Singapore and Harvard, I would think, maybe, extending another half day or so to get out of this time crunch a little bit, as people are traveling anyway. The other things I want to throw out, and some of them have been mentioned already, is we have face-to-face exchange at these meetings once a year. We might have something more often. We might think of, like Yaro does, for example, faculty and student exchange between ISCN members, people who can afford to send people around. So we've got more face-to-face that's on a one-off basis. but there's also the ongoing exchange throughout the year. The website is becoming a platform. We have some listserv function for ISCN members. We might add functions for working groups. So how much do we want to use a electronic format between the meetings, between maybe one-to-one exchanges as opposed to face-to-face? Also face-to-face, by the way, some people have done this here, and in Singapore it might even be more important for some people. I've seen people doing tours. So coming here but visiting Vancouver, visiting San Francisco. People come to Singapore, they might want to visit Shanghai again, they might want to go to Hong Kong, to Australia. So to offer, you know, not a guided tour taking a bus and 20 people flying them around, but, you know, saying, if you want to meet ISCN partners in this region, that's the context. These are the people who might want to host a discussion that might actually make the carbon more worthwhile as we go down there. So face-to-face versus ongoing electronic, where do you want to take the resources? The other thing is something we've been focusing on a global level. I think this is our role, but there's also clusters. We've got a West Coast cluster, East Coast cluster, an European cluster, and a starting beginning Asian cluster. Do people need more regional exchanges? Do we need a WebEx in one time zone? Do we need sub-meetings in the Northeast to prepare the Harvard meeting, for example? Think about that, what you want from your ISCN peers near to you, and let us know whether we can help with regional exchange as well. And then lastly, that's something that you, Rosie, said, you know, how much do we want to delve into a topic and develop it year over year deeper and deeper and deeper? Or how much do we have to jump around because new stuff is coming up on the horizon, look at a trend like smart grip, work on it a year, say, you know, this is done, move on to the next thing. And if we maybe develop deeper threads of something, how can we get more faculty in there as well? And I think I think we need both. I mean, it needs some deep trends, and then, you know, as you had, Steve, this year, you know, throw in some predictive analytics or some moral psychology just to mix it up, but not be distracted from what we're working on year after year. So these are kind of the sort of things I think we can think about: face-to-face versus web platform, global versus regional, staying with threads of discussions where they're throwing in new stuff. This is how we develop our style as the ISCN, I think. So you can continue.
So I thought that was very interesting. So some of the things that I heard, but want to make sure this is true, I heard you correctly, was I was just thinking that, you know, a lot of these comments fall into, you know, things that people want, like the case studies and the reporting and the metrics to facilitate the best practice sharing and understanding, you know, who's doing what. And then the skills and sort of capacity building that people want on the leadership development and the how, you know, how do you do this change? And then there's also sort of the strategic piece that gets back to, again, what are we, how are we all, why are we all here together? Rather than, you know, why do we all fly here? And that piece, I think Lee made a good point of, I think, you know, it's sort of the coming together of higher ed, private sector, governments, everyone together. And if we're really going to make systemic change, that systemic change is going to happen, you know, in convincing governments and changing the economy. So I think that just gets back to the other piece, which seems to be, again, maybe using some of the working sessions, like people have said, that could be longer, to figuring out some of those strategies and those linkages of how we could better leverage each other, but also work with others to speed this up. Does that at all? Yeah, Jim.
Well, absolutely. I mean, this is my first time I've attended one of these, and my institution's not a member, although it may change. And I would think that, say, going next year, one of the things that would be really helpful, and it might do the speeding up that you're talking about, is that I came here with a particular agenda. I wanted to learn about certain things and ask certain people certain questions. And if there was a way to, when people register and you know that they're coming, there was some kind of profile, like, this is what I do, this is what I'm good at, this is what I'm thinking about, this is who I want to generally talk with. You guys can do some, you know, matchmaking and people before, kind kind of go here knowing, wow, there's really 10 people I'd really like to meet.
That's a great idea. The other thing Amy and I talked about was mentoring people. So that could also happen in between conferences. Like you're saying, if you identified things that you wanted to hear more about or challenges you were having, people could also be linked between the conferences to do some of that sharing of knowledge as well. And I think then using the conference to have more of those really getting into rolling up the sleeves and working on, you know, how are we going to make an impact?
I think that's one you asked about technology and how to use your technology platform. I think many of the things that we've put up on the board are more about workshops and talking to each other and meaningful interactions between people when we are face-to-face, and less being talked at, which we do at lots and lots of other conferences. And I wonder if some of the case studies or you know, green building sort of synopsis of a really cool project could be done in advance as almost a webinar or a little, you know, an online talk that was available where you could watch that person's talk, and then that person would be available at the conference to lead a discussion or to go deeper in their topic, but not to give a talk that we might be able to find online. You know, instead capitalizing on the fact that we're actually in the room together.
Maybe the work groups could even do some work before the meeting, so that you move things along.
And you could almost eliminate the sort of being talked at component of the workshop.
There is a component that we're not utilizing to its fullest extent, and this is the awards. I mean, these are rich presentations of materials and strategies and ideas and examples. So I think the society ought to figure out how to bring that forward and make it useful to everybody.
I had a couple of comments on, obviously, new to the ISCN as well, and I thought John and Steve made some comments about developing that toolbox, and then moving on to more leading edge topics of discussion with the future ISCN conferences. But then I think there's a danger that you lose what you've already achieved, you know what I mean, unless you can kind of document it. So I thought maybe perhaps there was an opportunity to kind of draw a line on the discussion areas, document them through developing peer-reviewed methodological case studies and expert lists for the more fundamental things, such as green building design. And perhaps developing white papers with academic rigor to influence public policy around the more advanced topics that get discussed at the conference. But finally, you know, these aren't cheap exercises to do, and I wonder, I'm just asking with the ISCN, is there a plan to perhaps try and get more funding for the organisation so that, you know, some of these kind of really helpful tools and white papers and things like that can be developed, but I think just relying on people doing it off the side of their desk or meeting for a few days a year is probably not going to achieve as much as we want to achieve.
I mean, funding is always very difficult. We're just the core funding of the organization is currently to a large extent funded by the Swiss partners EPFR and EPFL, which is great and very grateful to them. The transition into membership funding, you know, this is kind of a rocky road. Getting particular funding for projects and in the working groups. We also thought about maybe having research assistance for a certain white paper in a working group that helps then the co-chairs and the other people. Would be wonderful. If anybody has idea for funding sources, please let us know. We're also thinking about it. But as you know, that's not the easiest part of it. Yeah. One thing to deepen this and also to respond to something said, I think, by you, Rosie, before, I think by Orion also, is before the meetings, you know, in the registration, you know, or you know, what's my expectation, what do I want to do, that would be great to point people to each other. But also as we develop case studies in the working groups, which has happened before the meetings, maybe has at least the working group peers. So somebody says, I want to do a case study on the community collaboration of a green building code that really hasn't worked for us. Having people ask, you know, what would I like to see in this case study? What are my questions? What have I seen working? What would I like to learn from this study? So people wouldn't produce case studies kind of sort of on a green field and then throw them in the working group, but say, I plan a case study on this kind of stuff, ask people what are you really looking forward for from my case, what would you like to learn, and then for people to have the case respond to a direct need. It might give us more value. It's something to think about.
Just something to add, I keep coming back to something Dan said earlier, and this group has such a unique opportunity to continue to raise the level of sophistication on how we approach these issues, given the global context, and also to make sure that, to ensure that this continues to rise as an important agenda item for the leadership in all of our institutions. We're not there yet, but this is one of those mechanisms. So I keep trying to connect the dots to something Steve said and Jen said, and many of you, but we're talking case studies, and I guess one kind of framework that keeps coming to mind is how do we raise the level of importance where somebody from like the World Council on Sustainable Development has to come and brief this group. So it's not just, so this is coming back to Steve's point, we do have to be selective as to where we choose to go in terms of engaging with one another, but it's so hard to keep up with the global dialogue. I mean, there's so many different dialogues taking place today. How can we use this as one of these forums where you're not just having a keynote presentation, maybe you erase, maybe we just throw that for a moment out the window, but you actually have briefings. So you end up with a briefing on the World Council on Sustainable Development, somebody from the UN. You end up with a briefing on, the latest, something Jack was saying yesterday on, the latest on global climate change and where we stand today. So it's much less about bringing in some iconic speaker and much more about you choose to come here because you're going to be briefed on these 4 important global issues from today. And part of ISCN's role is to filter that out so that it sparks the dialogue and it continues to connect us to these pieces as opposed to, it was wonderful to have David Orr, but as opposed to we're coming to see a person. And I think that begins to shift the way it frames the dialogue, and again raises to a level of issue based versus a specific person based.
I really like this idea, Julie. I also want to add to that. There might be other much more simple briefings, like we know Rio +20 is going on right now. There's this higher education treaty being formed there, with pros and cons and lots of uncertainties. We are thinking about webinar briefings for ISCN members, very simple ones, where you can basically say, within an hour, you can get download what's going on, so you save yourself time, checking it all out yourself. So it's something we're thinking about. We'll let you know when that is possible. It's going to happen.
Yeah, I think there's one trick here, and that is that we have a group that's worked together, and I think the camaraderie and the interchange has been very positive. We add a few people each year. Most of them are pretty much like ourselves. And if you look at it, this is the first meeting that there's been more than one institution from Southeast Asia. Just to put that in perspective, Southeast Asia has a population larger than the U.S. This year there are 2. If you look at the representation from India by population in China, these areas, and if we are going to really reach out to those people who mentioned Africa and Russia, we are going to change the composition of this group. I mean, one thought we had of trying to do that in a way that was to have a pre-meeting, get some institutions a mix of institutions, some that probably don't feel like flying halfway around the world either because they're never going to get the money to fly halfway around the world, or that really a lot of what we're talking about is not particularly of interest. They're much more into the meat and potatoes of sustainability at this point. And trying to, but some of those people undoubtedly would probably gravitate into membership. But is there real interest in doing that? Or because I think conceptually we all think it's a neat idea, but that's going to be a transition if we really do it and we really reach out. I mean, we can invite tons to the Singapore meeting. We can invite all the Australian universities, and we can probably get 5 or 6 more, and they'll be just like us, just like the people who are sitting in this room. But
For me, this is a question of the stages of the ISCN. We're building the foundation. We've got a core group of really great institutions. We've got some reports out there. We start, to compare and perform and disclose and benchmark. And I think now we're starting to have the pieces in place, especially if we add, senior faculty and some more trends-driven resources, that then you can share with others. Really, this is my priority. We collectively, this group is the leaders. And the leaders have a responsibility to help other people. Whether this is pre-meetings, training courses, one-on-one sustainability, whether we've got certain web resources, they say if you want to do a strategic sustainability plan, here's how two institutions did it. We have two different ones, Harvard and Indonesia or something. So how much of that is in our main meetings, how much is pre-meetings, how much might be regional courses, how much web resources, I don't know. But I'm very convinced, and I'm very committed to us getting a body of knowledge here that we share with people who cannot fly around, who are not the people who've done this for 10 years, who are the second and third and fourth year, absolutely. But this will have to be built up over time.
Yeah. Bert, you could maybe speak about your concept of the network of networks, because over the recent months, we did send some suggestions of leading universities in sustainability in different Asian countries who might participate. And it's not that you have to have every university from Korea or every university from Vietnam or Thailand or Malaysia, but if you had, say one from each major market, they could play the role that the US is doing in Singapore.
Absolutely. Connecting the networks. Asia is here, which is great. So the North American network is here. Last year we had the British and the Australian network, X and the EOC. We spoke about the Asian ones. We would very much love to have the South Korean network, which is up and emerging, in the Singapore meeting, so that we know what the regional networks are doing and they know what we're doing, and we share certain discussions. Absolutely. No, I'm looking forward to that.
So I think we're just going to wrap up by saying, I think we'll digest all of this. Thank you. And Amy and I will put together with Joe and Jack sort of a draft plan of what the next 2 years conferences might look like. What's the vision? What are the goals and the key priorities, both on the content part and also the format? And then maybe circulate it, certainly to everyone, but if there's a small group of people who'd also like to advise, and I think we'll iterate till we get something that, because it is a sort of difference from the past.
And if anybody on their way home after this session thinks of things, drop us an email.
Yeah. Does that sound good to people? Yes? Okay, great.
And also, last of all, if you have any suggestions as to how we can reach out to the universities in other continents and countries that are not represented here and who we would like to invite to Singapore or Harvard, and please let us know as well. So we appreciate you to help us spread the word and connect together the rest of the world. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Before we close this out for the big goodbye session, I was just informed that our speaker from India finally made it, and at least I want to acknowledge the effort you make to come here. That's wonderful. We would like to share the presentation you meant to give, but that didn't happen for logistic reasons, I assume, on the website. So please go there. Please look at the presentation as a PowerPoint, and please approach our Indian colleague during lunch and share your ideas, ask questions. We just spoke about the importance of Indian membership in the ISCN and sharing the experience you have down there, which is very different from other parts of the network. So I'm very pleased you're here. I'm sorry it's a little bit late. And please use our colleague as a resource also.
Half an hour late lunch? In Europe we have so many conferences that
need
run
to go
over an hour. And
Steve, what's your feeling on that?
Why don't you give me a few minutes to figure out how we could handle the situation. I have requests on a bunch of different sides, but I think in a few minutes we could resolve it.
Okay.
Maybe not everyone can join.
Yeah.
So would you think having lunch first and the presentation after, or trying to have a presentation right now before we go into goodbyes and lunch?
I think we should move forward with the plan, but we will make some kind of accommodation for folks who are available after lunch.
That's a perfect idea. Okay. So with that, I just want to say from my side, from the side of the ISCN team, we are very, very pleased how this conference went. We are very happy to all the speakers, presenters, planners, working group, co-chairs, for all the great contributions. We've seen that everybody said, we want to talk more, there's not enough time, there's so much great stuff going on, so it's always good if people want more, so that's fantastic. My main thank goes to Steve and his team and his university for throwing a wonderful meeting, a wonderful dinner last night, pretty thought-provoking, new elements to this meeting which we can think about going forward. Thank you so much for that.
Make a few final remarks and then we'll have lunch. I guess I wanted to say by start, for me, it feels like it's the last day of summer camp, you know? I really want it to end. I don't want to lose all my friends for the year and have to go back to school and not see you till next summer. But I guess that's where we're at, if that's the case. But I'm glad to have that feeling. I remember that feeling. Excuse me, I didn't expect that to happen. Emotion. I remember that feeling as a kid, and it's nice to have it again. Okay, so two logistical things. A lot of people have asked where can we get the PowerPoints, where can we get people's contact information, where are we going to find out the results of the survey, et cetera, et cetera. It will take a few days, but it's all forthcoming. So we have your emails, which means check your boxes, and maybe next week, it might be the week after, I can't promise exactly when. I don't think we had a single person actually follow through on a ping pong game. So, I take it back. Sounds like a few did. Well, in any case, I apologize. Sounds like a little ping pong did happen. I'm very happy about that. We have the room available well into the afternoon. So if you are staying for lunch and you do want to relax a little bit, the ping pong is there available. Lunch is down in the courtyard where we started on Tuesday afternoon. About the conference itself, did anybody see the movie Moneyball? Familiar with it? So about half or three-quarters. I remember I watched it, I don't know, it was 6-8 months ago with my wife. And the premise of the movie is basically there's a baseball team based in Oakland that's a relatively small market as compared to Boston or New York. And they wanted to put together an all-star roster on a small market budget. So that was the model for this conference. I said, we're going to do the Moneyball approach. And the reason why I bring that up now is because in order to do that, in order to pull it off, lots of different people had to make sacrifices and concessions, had to accept speaker honorariums, that kind of thing, far less than they're accustomed to. We had all kinds of donations. So even though most of our speakers have left the room in absentia, I really want to thank them for making the effort and making the conference possible. I do feel like we had a world-class list of speakers, and we put it together on a small market budget. So thanks to Leith, to Kai, to Poya, and to the others who are no longer with us this afternoon. I also want to thank you all. As I said in my initial email, that's stuff, the stuff that Leith brought, the stuff that Lou brought, that's fodder for discussion and inspiration. And what really makes it special is when people engage. And I feel really happy that that happened. And it was also a real privilege for me to share my hometown with you all. I'm very proud of where I live, and it's a real privilege to get to share it with you all. So the final thing that I'm going to do, it's only about 2 minutes left, and then you get to go to lunch. We spend most of our time as professionals focusing on the head, right? We try and persuade each other with numbers, with graphics, with strong presentation skills, that kind of thing. It would be, I think, this is my opinion, it would be magnified dramatically if we knew how to, and were trained better to open up our hearts. That's where we really become genuine, and I think that's where we make real impact. So I'm going to invite Leith up, because I think she's really good at this. She came to another, you can come on up, Leith. She came to another conference that I organized several years ago for Oregon institutions, and spontaneously, at the very end of the conference, Leith led everybody in song. And we had students, and we had members of our higher education board, and you could, certain people teared up, kind of like close to how I am right now, and things happened as a result of and I don't think not so much of the things that happened on the PowerPoints, but really because there was a genuineness at the end. So we're going to end that way. Leith, it's yours.
So, I want you to join me in, I hope
this isn't too culturally specific here, but the universal sound of not knowing, which is something roughly like, ah. So after 3, 1, 2, 3. Oh. The discovery. Again. Ah. Little loud, please. Ah. It's starting to sound like something else now. Only in the universal sound of pondering. After 3, 1, 2, 3. And again. Now, the universal sound of discovery and pondering. Oh. 1, 2, 3. And again. And so we go forward. Lastly, would you please give a standing ovation to Steve? Especially from very large men. Get into it with him.
Punches out on the